Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Stockbridge Assessors Board for Monday, August the 1st. Mike.
Good morning. Okay, last meeting minutes, there's two things on there that was carried over, the certification and the Berkshire Scenic Railway Museum, which we will discuss. Number two, I don't know if I had mentioned this before, but when we had our conversion done on Vision 6 to Vision 8, all the exempt land use codes that we had that determine, exactly what is what, were never, well, I don't want to blame Vision because it really isn't their fault. It was just one of those things, like they moved over the existing codes that we had. Well, during the data quality review that the state did in the spring, and I had made a note of this because I had a feeling we were going to have to do something. They said to me, well, when are you going to change all the codes to the new codes? And I said, I'll have a listing and we will be in contact with Vision to do that. And I don't know why I thought it would be the easiest thing in the world, but it was hardly the easiest thing in the world. So I went to do it last week thinking, we're in certification. This is part of it. They're never, yes, it's exempt. Yes, there's no tax bill that's generated, but the land use codes are all different. They call them the Gatsby codes, which have to be changed. So Joe said, just keep an eye on it. Make sure you have those guys change them. Well, the thing is, they don't know what to change them to because they're completely different. I have to tell them, okay, this is a firehouse, this is a school, this is a town hall, and the codes have to be, you can't, the old codes, literally all those were under a code called 905. They're all under separate codes now. I spent 3 days on this trying to get these things to work. I thought it would be easy. They added all the new codes in the version 8 and I thought we were good to go. I said, I can take it from here. Show me how to do a few and then I'll handle the rest. So he did that. A great person on software support helped me through it. But then I started to go in and I brought it home with me and I started looking at why do they have these codes that say like 905V, 905R, 905I, and I realized, well, one's got to be for vacant land, one's got to be for residential, one can be for outside improvements like a shed. And then I realized that even though they set them up on Vision as a general code, it bombed out so bad every single time I went into one that had a V or an R. And he couldn't understand. He's like, maybe those codes were put in because when we did your transfer from version 6, which was 4 or 5 years ago, over to version 8, maybe they didn't know what to describe it as, so they added these codes in. And I said, I don't think so. These are in here for specific reason. And then I realized going through it, several parcels that are exempt have properties, houses on them that are listed as a colonial, that might be listed as a mansion. Those are all residential in an exempt commercial world. So every time I went to one of those, and this is scary, I did not know what to do when I saw this message pop up, but it basically said, you're switching from, let's just say, for example, 905V to a 951. You're going to, all your data will be deleted and you will have to rekey everything. And I immediately picked up the phone and said, what does this mean? And they said, well, the system is basically doing what it's supposed to do. You're changing a land use, and changing a land use typically means you print out the record card and you rekey the data. I said, have you seen some of these buildings? I said, I can't rekey it because it's all the construction, every construction piece of information, the outbuildings, the extra features, the sketch, it deletes the photo and I have to go find the photo, recent photo. And I said, this can't be right. Then I'm on my second day and I'm sweating bullets because I don't need this. I'm like, this has to be something that I thought would be fixed. And of course the state's like, just change it. It'll be quick. Just get in there and change it. Finally, they set up all those extra codes for me. And they're like, but these are all duplicates. I said, it doesn't matter. Put the V, put the R, put the I, and let me go in and see what that does. It fixed it. But just so you know, and the values are fine, but the record cards right now as it stands, if any of those codes are used on a record card, and we can deal with this later on in the year, it's not going to mess up certification. It now prints on the record card for every category instead of adding them all together. It'll print like 3 different values for the building, 2 different values for the land, but in the end, it all adds up. And I kept running an LA4 to make sure that the totals, even though it's exempt, we still have to match the totals, that the totals were coming out and that we have 157 exempt parcels, and making sure that every single one is adding up in the proper category, and it works. So, but it was one of those things that I had no idea it was going to take that long. It's done. The state shouldn't, I actually talked to Joe Barberi last week and I told him about it, and he's like, unless you said something, I would have never known. I said, but you're the one that told me we needed to do this, and I'm glad we went through and we made those changes. So again, even online, once we put those cards online, when everything is said and done, they're gonna look a little wonky for a bit until I can have vision go through, and they're gonna have to reprogram how it adds up all those different land uses, which are all new, and puts them into one total. But all the reports that I run, they give me one total. So I think we're gonna be good to go. There shouldn't be any issues when we do the tax bills, because there are no tax bills printed for the exempt. But I wanted to put it out there just in case you happen to see that. It looks weird, but it's okay right now. And that's done. I mean, I moved on from that after 3 days. Number 3, update on the fiscal 23 certification. Joe was supposed to be out here this week, but from the last meeting, I told you that I'm not finished. It was those dates were all, just we have to put dates down on the work plan. And he's like, don't worry about it. He's like, but you need to enter your sales and get those to me. And as soon as really the residential will be done this week, and I'll recalc the values at the end of the week, but he wants me to enter in all the sales. We're kind of jumping the gun. The sales usually get put in after the certification is done. He wants me to put them in now. And he's like, just put them in, but don't submit them. That way I can look at them and make sure everything's okay. I wouldn't be putting them in there if they weren't okay. So those I'll enter. I'm away at school tomorrow, but Wednesday, and if I have time today, I'll put them in. And then I have the commercial, the personal property is done. The appraisal for the Glendale power plant should be here by the end of the week, and I have to plug that number in. We'll be good on that. The utilities are in. I just have to do the spreadsheet for I finally got the tables from the DOR to be able to do the spreadsheet for the wireless companies. That'll take a day to do. So I'm hoping by time we have our next meeting, Joe will have scheduled something to be out here. He's now, he's got Pittsfield. I believe he's got Otis, because he was talking about Brandy. He was visiting with her last week. And Williamstown. Williamstown is one of his towns too, because I was talking to the assessor there about certification. Everything conforms right now. What I'll be doing at the moment is any land changes that took place, I have to present to him, and he'll end up giving it to his supervisors. Remember that map I have that has all the different colors with the different site indexes? That's changing. And I mean, it hasn't been updated since the last reval, but I have all these little sticky notes. I had to change this to this, had to change this to this. All that has to be updated. There has to be a whole one done for around the bowl. I do it all by hand. We don't really have a printout that I can just give him. And I think it's going to be fine. It's just, again, the unknown, and he does have a lot of other communities. So hopefully, I've made it very aware to Mike and hopefully to the select board that, this is a very important project, and, certification has to take place before. And I just want to briefly get into what the next stages are, so there's no confusion on anyone's part about what we have to do in the assessor's office before we can even proceed with a classification hearing. Classification hearing right now is so far down the line, because certification, there is a preliminary process of which we're in the midst of doing right now. When the state comes up and reviews it, they could be here for a day, they could be here for a week. Typically, it's around 2 or 3 days. They take everything back to the office and then they start shooting out what's called edits. Mike, we need this. We need this. Edit this, change this, get this to conform. Everything has to be done. I submit the top 10 taxpayers at that time. Once they're satisfied that everything looks good, they will give us preliminary certification. Let's just say, for example, that happens end of August, beginning of September, which is not unusual. That's typically the range that we're in. Once we get that, we're not done. We then have to do and I know you guys remember this, we haven't done it in 5 years. We have to do a public disclosure of all of our new values to anybody outside of the 01262 zip code. It's not just second homeowners, it's just anybody that would have a difficult time getting here to look up a value, even though, even if we posted them online. The state requires we have, Tammy will have them on her desk. I typically bring them up to the library and a few other, if I could think of any other places where the public can have easy access to a listing, anybody can look at to see what their new value is. That will take at least a week and a half to prepare. I mean, we probably can get it done pretty quick. I have a mail merge that I do through Excel. We used to write them all down, but now the system will print out the value, print out the little blurb. It will say in that public disclosure document, of which I have to also send to the DOR for approval, they have a certain amount of time to inquire about the current assessment. And that means both of us answering phone calls for a period of time. And I'm stressing this because this cannot be skipped. This is once it's done, then the state requires a thing called the LA-10, which is a report that will say the Board of Assessors did not do any reviews where we met with people. All we did was a mailer and we wrote down their concerns, but we didn't hold hearings. If we held hearings, we wouldn't have a tax bill out until February. Typically, cities are the ones that hold hearings. We do public disclosure by sending out a listing to everybody. We'll probably put it on the website because at that point, values aren't going to change. I mean, it's preliminary, but you might as well say it's final unless we find a very unusual issue where we have to change a batch of values. We pretty much do it this way all the time. So after that process is done, which the state requires 2 weeks after your notice hits the mail. So we're talking at least 3 weeks, another week when I submit for final certification. When and that basically is a formality. I'd be shocked. I'm always shocked that the state asks for things during final because wait a minute, we're at final. We shouldn't be dealing with any more questions. So let's say now we're into final certification. We get final certification. We are now in a typical assessing year as if the reval never happened. So we now have to submit our new growth, which is all the construction that we picked up during the year. That has to be approved by the same person who will be approving our certification, Joe Barberi. Once that's completely done, then we can schedule the classification hearing. So, and that's why I always, in a certification year where there could be, things that are basically out of our control, we're still following, guidelines and rules set in place, but it's always the unknown. That could possibly push the classification easily into October, November. I don't think we've ever had a classification in a certification year that wasn't in end of October, beginning of November, and we're semi-annual. So my concern has always been, are we going to have enough time, even in a certification year, to produce a tax bill? And, I've been told at this point that we should just focus on making sure that we can get the certification done and have everything done the way it's supposed to, following their guidelines, and that everything else will fall into place. But we'll see at this point. But I want to just make sure that everyone knows what the timeline is, because I don't want to say I'm rushing. I don't want to make any mistakes. These are just, work plans that are set up. There's dates that are set. Things get moved around. For all I know, Joe could come back and say, I'm bogged down with another community, I'll get to Stockbridge when I get to you, and that can prolong us. Making phone calls to the Commissioner of Revenue to bump things up certainly does not help things at all. So right now, I think we're in a good place, but, you know, there's just been some talk about how quickly can we have our classification hearing. Well, there's nothing quick about it. It will happen once all those other steps are in place. That is a public hearing that has to be advertised as a public hearing, and there's no way you can jump the gun on that. And I don't want anything to go wrong heading through certification if we're worrying right now about classification. Number 4, at our last meeting, we talked about questions. For the Berkshire Scenic Railway Museum, I did talk to Donna with Mears and Harrington, and she said absolutely. I had mentioned that we were going to come up with some questions. I came up with 8 different ones, and I'll read them off, and you guys can. Do you want me to read them off, or is that something that we should wait on?
No.
Okay, because I did these over the weekend, and she told me, she's like, send me what you have, and I can doctor them up, and we can add different things to it. And I think these are pretty generalized. So the first one is, please describe in detail your organization's primary mission, function, or purpose. Even though on the 3ABC they do list that, it's a little one-liner. So I would like them to go into a little bit more detail. Number 2, as a museum, what type of work or works or historical displays will be available for viewing by the general public? And I think that question will set up exactly what kind of museum, because I don't think that was the initial intent to have an open space there, but we were told the last time we met with them that they would do that. So I think that would be are you saying you would? And is it something that would be easy to do? I mean, a museum has to offer something, I believe, that is historic, in some manner. I think Donna would agree too. I mean, you can't just open up a museum you could open up a museum literally for everything, but what are your displays going to be? Number 3, how many hours will the museum be open to the general public? Number 4, is there an admittance fee for the museum? If yes, how much? And is there a discount to residents of Stockbridge? Is there also a discount for the train ride events for the Stockbridge residents? Number 5, will the museum be run by Berkshire Scenic Railway Museum itself or by a different company that is hired by Berkshire Scenic Railway? Number 6, will the museum have a gift shop? Number 7, will the museum be a walk-through, self-guided type of museum? If not, please explain the type of museum it will be. And the last one that I came up with is number 8. It has been mentioned that a separate hospitality company has been hired to oversee the event planning, both for the train rides and the use of the existing building. Please describe in detail who this company is and the exact role they will play in this business. So I think that generally it covers the museum part of it. I didn't really know what to talk about with the event planning and the rides themselves. I thought maybe we should put something in there like how frequently is this going to happen?
Well, I mean, my only thought would be and I think that Donna might have mentioned it, but I don't know. I think we need to know, percentage of time that's open. Is there what tips the scale to make, if it's, if they're open 3 hours a day, 7 days a week, does that meet the requirement to be tax exempt? Or I guess I need to know what,
And who's going to be running it too?
Well, that and, what passive versus live folks being on site, does a passive display, is that going to meet the requirements of an exempt status.
And that would be more like that'd be a question for Donna, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering too, so I wonder, if you can share that with the three assessors, and if we were to respond with additions and alterations,
Oh, yeah.
that's not breaking the open meeting.
No,
law.
because we're not discussing it. We're going to send it to Mike.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's,
And we would send these out certified
so that's
to them.
Well, so I think that would be the next step, is that we can use yours as a basis, and we can add and subtract.
And then it should go to Donna.
Figure out which ones you like, or maybe make additions to yours. I mean, because one thing I will say is, when we're talking about, we might need details about like revenue. Okay.
Yes.
If the catering business is going to.
Typically, you're supposed to get a
represent-
package like this.
Yeah, if the catering is going to represent 10% of the revenue, or is the catering going to represent 90% of the revenue, and the museum is going to be 10%? I think there has to be a percentage by which we have to have some type of gauge to see.
So it's really like the event percentage versus the train ride percentage, or the
The
museum.
railroad.
The railroad, yeah, the
slash
railroad.
museum.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because to Doug's point, if, if it's a catering venue, then it's, I would say that it's not, it doesn't meet the requirements, you know?
So
But then the other
basically-
argument would be is that, if most of the revenue goes towards it being a museum, then there's something to be said for that as well.
So it's basically, is the dog wagging its tail, or is the tail wagging the
Wagging the
dog?
dog, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Because the meeting that we had with them, they, which was open, they mentioned, they had no plans for a museum.
exactly.
This was,
and
well,
there's
we can
that's
do
the road that we
this.
have, that's the.
That's the issue right
That's the issue
there.
we have. I mean, it's a great idea, but it doesn't help us,
Well,
making them a.
It comes about as a means of, it wasn't the initial plan, it was a means of satisfying your requirements for tax exemption.
so the use has to be consistent with their tax exempt purpose.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely with their mission and their function. I mean, was that what I don't think that's what's on their 3ABC, but I will double check, but that
Actually,
has to be part
That's a
of
good
it.
question. You could just put, is your projected use consistent with your mission statement?
Yeah.
And
Does it-
does it meet the tax exempt requirement for Stockbridge?
Yeah, does it, further the mission of your.
Or not for Stockbridge, but just in general, the tax exempt status that you're requesting.
Now, what about the parking issues? I mean, you think that should be brought in? I mean, that's not really.
That's not our
No.
problem.
I mean, I've already heard from.
The planning board would ask them that question. Because I'm assuming they're going to come for a sign permit and some other things, I mean, use permits we don't do anymore. So those are by right.
Yeah, so here, I did make copies.
Thanks, Mike.
But you're going to email them as well.
Yes, I will.
We can-
Yep.
Yeah.
Electronically.
Yep. Anything else you can think? I mean, I could have thought of more. It was just,
No, I think less is more. I mean, we don't have to get in the weeds on it. I think we need to just hit
Yeah. And open-ended questions that let them
fill it.
expand.
Yeah. We don't want to lead them into what to say. We want to know what they have to say.
And I think we also, so we're talking about percentage of revenue over the given year, but I think we also need to talk about use over the season.
Yeah.
So in other words, if it's a museum for a month, does that justify?
oh, that's true. Is it seasonal?
So I mean, so I think time, some type of time element has to be introduced.
Yeah.
Now, what about anything specific to the events or the plannings that they have scheduled? I mean, I don't know what they are.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
remember what he said
like
last
Doug
time.
says, if you're going to have weddings and functions, if that's your main objective, then it's not meeting the.
No.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, it's going back to
I don't know.
the seasonal question. Just
Yeah.
because it's seasonal is not necessarily the end all be all. I mean, we have a lot of seasonal
Oh, sure.
establishments like Tanglewood,
Yep.
Chesterwood.
Chesterwood is very.
But are we talking like, are they gonna
No, I'm kidding.
close
Well,
the
no.
doors and not let anybody in and then
Or is the nonprofit part only going to be seasonal and the rest is going to be year round?
that too?
I mean, so basically you could have, a museum for July and August, then you have catering 12 months a year.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that in itself right there is not satisfying I don't know. I
think the revenue question would help fill that in too, because
okay, so we really should just say, all they submitted was the 3ABC. They did not submit the financials that go.
and I wonder if we should make the questions a little bit more, I wonder if the question should be a little bit more generic. In other words, like do we need to mention museum? All I'm saying is that in this case, he said museum, but if we were to use this for other nonprofits, I'm just wondering.
I think Donna might want to be specific on it.
Okay.
Because she was bringing up things about, well, this particular place had a gift shop, so that disqualified, and the money was all going back into, it wasn't the company, if it's going back into the organization, that's one thing, but it had to be segregated from the business. And so, I mean, she was talking about a museum, so I'll talk to her and see if she wants to be more specific about it. I mean, they mentioned, they have museum in their name, so I'm just wondering if that was ever their intent to begin with, or if it was, like I said, a means to get to. I'm not assuming it. I just feel that might be.
You could just ask her if it should be more generic or should it be specific? I mean, so if we have to do this again, can we use the same set of questions, or do we change the questions for every single applicant?
Well, and that's the thing is I'm wondering if we change it every time for every applicant, does that open us up to
I think that's why I'm leaning more towards.
The questions that the way that this came about was her telling me about an appellate tax board case. Mm-hmm. Because let's say, for example, if you were to deny this, they have every right to go to the appellate tax board. And through the formal procedure with the appellate tax board, she was using the term interrogatories. That's exactly what these are. They're allowed to ask us a maximum of 22 questions, and they can be multi-tiered. I've answered these before and they're not fun. But they have to be done. And if it's a formal hearing, we then in return can ask them up to 22 questions as well. And it's under a formal, it's basically like a typical, court case. Everything has to be out in the open. If we have something for evidence, we have to present it to them and vice versa. So I think I have a feeling she'll come back and say that they need to be detailed, specific, but I don't know. I can ask her.
Okay.
But I think it's definitely, when I did talk to her, she said she could look at past cases and see, but I think this one is so specific, I don't know if there's something she can find that's closer, but she's been following it, so she's aware of what's going on. Won't get into, yes or no, that's up to you guys, but give us all the tools to get there.
I would wonder what Donna would say if we said, if a nonprofit owns a vacant property, is there any special?
You don't mean that like a land conservancy group?
No, not.
You mean like a parking lot?
No, vacant as in not being used. So let's say a museum buys a piece of property.
Oh, with a building on it.
With a building on it. And you say, you know what, our long-term plan is we're not going to use it for 5 years. And during that 5 years, it's not really used. Mm-hmm. But so if it's a vacant, that actually might open it back up because their future plan is to use it as something in the future.
True.
As long as they don't use it for anything, they might be.
Well, I would imagine through COVID that probably has happened.
Right.
And we're still seeing it too. Businesses are still coming back and they're not all for profit. So she might have some experience on
So that's
on that.
So if we can grant it based on vacant use, saying, hey, you know what, we're just mothballing the building, we're going to be using it as a museum down the road. That's a lot more reasonable use of a building, assuming it's not used commercially for any other purpose. You know?
Right. Right. And I mean, I can't imagine that if we're saying, well, what is the museum component of this? And then all of a sudden you're scrambling to come up with a museum component. I mean, there is research and things involved with opening up anything that's going to be viewed by the public, factual documents. You know, I mean, yeah, I know there's, you know, come to the museum with the largest ball of twine. You know, I mean, anyone can, a roadside museum in a gas station. But I would feel that this would have to be very specific. And that there, you know, I know up in North Adams, you know, we had the Heritage State Park and there was a museum there. I mean, I remember going to it when I was a teenager and there were very specific displays and it was really cool. And I'm just thinking, is that the goal or is that something that they're just trying to put into place to satisfy the real mission? And I think that's the big question right there.
Yeah, but at the same time, we can't be the museum snobs.
No,
So it's.
I wouldn't be.
Is the museum open?
Yes.
For a set period of time?
Right.
But
And is it like a quick walkthrough or, and does it even
It
matter?
doesn't matter. I think that
You know?
it doesn't matter because if they happen to have a really great product that people want to pay $10 and it takes them 10 minutes, but if they're successful at it, more power to them. So
Right.
I think it's.
Okay,
Maybe you could even talk to the assessor in Lennox and just see if there's any history on when they started the one in Lennox, how that kind of started.
is that the one that Tom was referring to? That he, no.
Well, it's their-
Separate,
It's their depot.
Yeah.
okay,
Up by, what's the body of water? Up by the little pond there where the dam is.
Yeah, Woods Pond?
Yeah.
they're in between assessors now and like,
All right.
I mean, but that's the thing is that's a little bit different because quite frankly, that's where they have like a lot of stuff stored and they
Yeah.
have, they work on the stuff.
Yeah.
So they're actively using it in a,
Yeah, but that's now, I just wonder what it was like when they started.
yeah. But still, even if they were there, like working on and restoring the stuff, I think that's clearly in their mission. So I think it might be a little easier for them to justify that because they are
Yeah.
preserved.
I'm not sure about the one in North Adams yet. I don't think it's open anymore. That place is, the Heritage State Park, really, it's just the restaurant that's there now,
Well, I'm just wondering if they did some of their functions in Stockbridge instead of in Lennox, if that helps the argument or not.
It would help.
I would think it would.
Yeah. As long as they are doing it for them.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, I think I have a lot to go with. Do you want me to add to this list and then email it or just,
However you want. If you want to adjust it since our conversation,
okay,
then we'll have a little bit
all right.
cleaner basis.
Why don't we do that? I'll go through my notes. Okay, is there anybody? No.
I don't think we have
Buddy.
anybody.
We do have to go into executive session though.
Okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, we are done with our open meeting. And at this point, I'm going to entertain a motion to enter into executive session per Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to discuss and review motor vehicle abatements and property tax exempt status for several properties, and to declare whether or not, we will not return to open session at this point. So I would entertain a motion to close the public or to close the public meeting.
So moved.
All those in favor? Oh, I guess I got to second it. I'll second that. All those in favor? Aye. And now I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session and not return to the public.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.